I'm going to do a prayer of gratitude, just short, and then a description in brief of what is energy healing. And then we'll dive into today's topic, which is how we embody divinity. Ooh, it's a very juicy topic, and I'm looking forward to sharing all the new information that came up over the last week or so with everybody, and last couple of weeks, and doing lots of healing work. The idea of this webinar, today's webinar, is to do lots and lots of energy healing to support and promote and maintain the integration of being, of source, into every particle of the relative material level of ourselves. So, okay, subtle and gross, both. So, all right. Thank you to the source of creation for being everything, for being our live webinar, for being all of us. Thank you as us and through us for being the ability to work concisely and efficiently, and we want to go right to the core of any situation, any area where attention needs to focus. Thank you to the ancestors for the presence of the physical form. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom for being the link or connection between the absolute and the relative. All right, I think I covered everything. Thank you everyone for being with me. Thank you for us doing this together. So, all right. What is energy healing? Energy healing is the process of focusing our attention in a way that influences the material level of creation. So essentially, it's a process of folding consciousness in a more subtle form into the expressions of consciousness at the denser levels, and making a loop, attention into the relative, back to attention like that. We're making a loop. And as we make these loops of awareness, the nature of our intention affects the relative. The nature of our intention affects the relative. So attention is the vehicle on which intention rides, and the overall effect is a transformation, first at the deep levels of consciousness, at the abstract or non-manifest levels, and then at the denser, more manifest levels. And one of the main principles of energy healing is that awareness, and also particularly in these webinars, is that we are consciously awakening awareness at each point in the transformation process. Because when we do that, it brings totality or wholeness into each point, which is actually kind of the theme of tonight's session anyway, but good to have it right in a seed form at the beginning, and then we'll elaborate as we go along. All right, that's energy healing in a nutshell. I speak and give verbal expression to the process. All right, thank you all. Here we go. Embodying divinity. So as you all know, in the weeks preceding the webinar, I get downloads of information. And in these most recent weeks preceding this, preceding this webinar, I got pieces of information which for a while didn't seem to be very closely related to each other. But I feel as if everything has kind of gelled now as we're coming up on this moment. And so there's a nice complete package to offer everyone. So on this note, I'd like to start with a little piece of information about belief. One validation that I got just a few days ago, I had uploaded a video about the circle of the paradigm wheel, which is a way of understanding how belief fits into the system of understanding energy healing. Almost the same day that I uploaded my video, wonderful, brilliant woman who I've been aware of for many years also uploaded a video, She's a medical doctor who's been studying spontaneous remissions, particularly of extremely life-threatening diseases. And it's fascinating to note that she pointed out that in the Library of Congress, and I've mentioned this statistic before, which I got from her, Dr. Lissa Rankin, by the way, if anyone wants to look her up, she's fascinating, that in the Library of Congress, there are over 34,000 case studies of spontaneous remissions from all varieties of diseases and illnesses, which were brought about only by the placebo effect or the consciousness of the individual. That they didn't, these remissions of illness took place without the intervention of Western medicine. Not to say there's anything wrong with Western medicine. We like Western medicine too, but she has noticed all these little patterns that tie together all these spontaneous remissions. And the most significant pattern that she found, this was so fascinating, you guys, was that all the people who were sent home by their doctors with like, sorry, you have 3 weeks to live, or sorry, there's nothing we can do for you, find hospice or whatever. All of these spontaneous remissions had two consistent features. Number one, the person actually believed that they were going to get well. Belief. They actually believed they were going to get well. And two, they had a support system. They had somebody there who was willing to absolutely validate their belief. So they not only had their belief, but they had that reflection from the environment telling them, yes, if you think you can do it, you can do it. All right. So the other thing that she said, and I'm just bringing out these three little points: belief, support. The third thing she said was that as soon as that golden combination comes in, the body goes into a parasympathetic mode. So for those who are, I wasn't fully remembering what's the difference between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic. So just a quick review: sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. And sometimes that means shut down too. When the sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear, one is oriented towards quick application to a problem, a fast application to a problem. Whereas the sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest and reproduce that nervous system. So, and they call them nervous systems because they actually engage different parts of the physical human nervous system. And we're going to get into that shortly as we start doing some healings for that. But I wanted to bring that up because what I realized, there are a couple things that I realized after watching Dr. Rankin's work. She, like some of the other interesting people that I follow, are kind of like edging their way up to the absolute. They're like trying to find that connection to being. And that's what we already have here in energy healing. So we're already able to use the foundation of all this objective validation. You know, we're able to enjoy that objective validation for the work that we're already doing, which is really wonderful. And I feel is actually very much a part of the integration of divinity into the relative field, because like I was saying to my husband, there's a paradox here when we're talking about divine embodiment. Well, the divine is already embodying everything, right? Like really everything. So why bother doing energy healings for divine embodiment? But the thing is that there are degrees of conscious awareness about the process, and there is the element of integration is also really important. So we know the divine is in everything. Wholeness or totality is in all the parts. But the factor of awareness is really important. So I know it feels like I'm kind of putting out a lot of little pieces here, and this is kind of how this particular webinar came to me, in these little pieces, but they all knit together at the end. So we'll aim in that direction. Let's start. I would like to start right now with getting everyone kind of connected up together, all of our nice, big, yummy healing collective. Everyone who's here, I see there's quite a few people online, and we've got a whole room full of people over here. Good to see everybody. All right. So the parasympathetic nervous system, when it activates, healing happens for the body. This is the thing. So she's looking at what activates. Lissa Rankin is looking at what activates the parasympathetic nervous system. But we know that directing attention intelligently is what activates any part of the body, right? So let's do a little exercise for the parasympathetic nervous system. This is a take home for you. You can do this anytime at home. It's important to know where the nervous system, which part of the nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system. So I shall now describe. The parasympathetic nervous system is centered, both the sympathetic and parasympathetic are centered in the spinal area of the body. The sympathetic, the flight and flight, is like between the kind of like mid-chest, I can't see a thing with all my hair here, about mid-chest there, all the way down to kind of like the lumbar region of the back. And right along the spine, I have to explain to you about the sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic because you have to understand them together. So along the outside of the spine, there are these nerves that run along the outside of the spine, and they have like little nodes in them, they kind of look like little chains running along either side of the spine. And this is the sympathetic nervous system. So it's taking up most of the spine. The parasympathetic nervous system sits at the far ends of the spine, right down in the coccyx. There's some points, important points down there, and then way up at the top of the spine, at the base of the, like, what do we call this? The brainstem, right in the brainstem area. So these are the two areas of the parasympathetic nervous system. It takes up a smaller area, but it's extremely significant for healing. So when I found out about the parasympathetic nervous system, I was like, oh, I just want to live in parasympathetic mode. I just want to be here all the time. How can I be in parasympathetic mode all the time? And I started like paying attention to moments when I was definitely feeling that parasympathetic feeling and moments when I wasn't. And, you know, kind of adjusting and readjusting activity. What I discovered was, number one, meditation is like the ultimate activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. Ultimate. When we're meditating, there's just that, with transcending, when the mind transcends thought and goes to the source of thought, that luscious, deep, inebriating, eternal peace and silence of the inner being. The parasympathetic nervous system is like full on. It's full on. So this is important to know, that when the mind is transcending, the body is in basically full tilt healing mode. Some of us have been meditating for many decades, but the realization hadn't, like the connection hadn't fully been made. But once the connection was made, and the experience of transcending is accompanied by the knowledge that this is when my body is in its fullest healing mode, that was very powerful. All right, so here's this exercise. Exercise combined with healing. If it's easier to close the eyes, close the eyes. What we're going to do is we're going to direct our attention intelligently to the area at the brainstem, and then also at a spot near just at the bottom of the spine. So we want to bring attention to these two extreme ends of the central spinal column. Just feeling these spots, these two areas where the parasympathetic nervous system is rooted. And bringing attention in there starts to activate that. You will probably notice as you put your attention on these two ends of the spinal column that some feeling of peace increases softness, calmness, calmness increases. Parasympathetic nervous system is your healing mode. So we're going to take, in this exercise, we're just going to take a moment to enjoy deepest gratitude for the ability of the human body to heal itself. Gratitude for the existence of the parasympathetic nervous system. For some people, there may be a little feeling of release. It's one of these situations where people rarely focus their attention directly on this particular part of the body. Like, who thinks to put their awareness on I'm going to put my awareness on my parasympathetic nervous system? No, nobody ever thinks that. And so even when you need to heal, even when you're in healing mode, whoever thinks that? So what happens when we start to put our attention on this part of the nervous system is it starts to act like a neglected child. It's the area that has been not given attention for like maybe our whole lives is suddenly getting this loving attention that it so appreciates. And so what happens as we start to send loving gratitude and reverence to the parasympathetic nervous system is, after the little wave of release and relief, like, oh, you saw me, after that happens, it kicks into enhanced mode. The capabilities of the parasympathetic nervous system are enhanced, strengthened. The flow of consciousness through this part of the body becomes less constricted when the awareness goes into this part of the body. It opens up, it liberates the capabilities of the parasympathetic nervous system to interface with the rest of the body and to promote a flow of the not only gross material chemicals that are produced by this part of the system, such as endorphins and oxytocin and serotonin and dopamine, but the subtler energies that are also produced by this part of the system. What I noticed when I was experimenting with this exercise was that the two ends of my spine were feeding all that healing energy back to the heart, because it was from the heart that I was experiencing the gratitude and love. And so it started to create a kind of a resonant hum between the parasympathetic nervous system and the energies of the heart chakra area of the body. The energies of the heart chakra area of the body represent that person, that support system. Remember, Lissa Rankin was saying you need to have the belief, but you have to have someone who actually loves you, who compassionately stands by you for the healing process. Well, it turns out that we can create that for ourselves just by bringing in this resonant relationship between our beautiful hearts and the two ends of our spinal column. Every time I do this, it's such a flood of love, just a flood of love through the whole body. So amazing. But the flood of love comes with a flow of neurochemicals, which are extremely soothing and comforting and calming and like sacred. They bring us into a sacred healing space. So for any healing work, it's okay. We can open our eyes now. And you might notice as you open your eyes gently that the body still is feeling like humming. The body is still humming with the bliss and the love and the sweetness and the comfort that comes from, oh, raised hands. Oh, yes, I'm so happy you're with me. Yes, beautiful. Lots of people raising hands. Oh, yay. Oh, many hands, many hands, many hands. So you can see there are two really big values to this exercise. The first value is it sets the whole system into a kind of a sacred healing space. So it creates a condition whereby healing is maximized. The other thing is that it has cumulative effects. So anytime you do this exercise, the experience of light and sweetness and comfort and ease in the body increases. One of the thoughts I had when I was thinking, after listening to this talk by Dr. Rankin, I was thinking about the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, and I was thinking, well, the sympathetic nervous system must have some correlates with the nucleus accumbens, which is the pleasure center in the brain. And the sympathetic nervous system must have a correspondence with the amygdala, which is the pain center in the brain. So when I was thinking about that, I realized that that means that there's probably a spectrum of activation between these two. They say, well, you have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic, and I'm not a doctor, so I don't know all the details, but the way Dr. Rankin was talking about, it's kind of like the two are sort of opposites, so they don't tend to mix together. That was the impression that I got from her work. And by the way, I'll send that video. It just came out like about 6 days ago or something. And it's a lovely video. It only has a few hundred hits on it, but it really was something good. So yeah, that they don't really mix together. But we know that in our brains, the nucleus accumbens and the amygdala do work together sometimes for those very, very intense, poignant experiences that are transformative, the most transformative experiences, the most significant experiences, like birth, like when a woman gives birth. There's this combination of both pain and unbelievable joy, right? So it's like this combination. Or death is another example, that if you've ever had the privilege of being with someone when they passed away, there's something incredibly, deeply, profoundly beautiful about seeing the whole life, right? When you know somebody, yeah, right? Oh, we have hands raised there too. Yeah, when you know somebody during their lifetime, it's a joy. Somebody you love, it's a joy to see them and be with them. But at the end, you see the whole lifetime as like a package, and there is the story of divinity incarnate, right there. That is divinity embodied, essentially, because divine being came in as this form, and it did a whole complete experience, and then it finished. Wholeness. Then you see the wholeness of a human life. That's something. It's very beautiful. It's very sad, but it's also very beautiful. Okay, enough about death. We want life. Anyway, so, all right. So I was thinking about the importance of belief, and the reason that the paradigm wheel came up over the last couple of weeks was because, and I'll give you a diagram of it in just a minute or so. The reason it came up was I realized that if a person's belief is one of the key components to making the difference between literally completely recovering from, say, 4th stage cancer or dying, if belief is one of the key components, then what happens if we turn the principles of energy healing around onto belief? What happens? All of a sudden, we have a combination which is extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. If we can heal our beliefs, if we can place our awareness in such a way as to have a direct influence, I would say intentional influence on the formation of beliefs, then it means that there's nothing that one can't believe. And okay, it's one thing to say, well, I believe I have $900 million, but, but I don't, right? You say, well, I believe I'm a 5-foot tall Chinese woman, but I'm not, right? Okay, so there's certain lines in there, but that's what we need to look at. We need to look at those boundaries and look at those lines in order to understand how awareness or attention folds back into the field of belief in order to make the belief system as orderly and well aligned with cosmic evolution as possible. Because ultimately, the embodiment of divinity means stabilizing in these systems, in our physiologies and in all the subtler levels of who and what we are, stabilizing whatever that form is that best supports the permanent establishment of being in its fullest possible value. You could say a person's full potential at every point, right? That's what, I mean, that's one way to understand and describe divine embodiment. Okay, so I tried to make a drawing on my paint, my Windows paint, and I'm not technical enough to do it. So I'm just going to draw you a drawing. Okay, so what happens here is it's a circle. It's a circle made of circles. And is that forward to everybody? Yeah. Sorry, this is kind of like low tech, really low tech. Please forgive me. It's somewhere online on the video I made, but like I had no access to it. So anyway, here we go. So belief is right up there. We're going to start with belief at the top. Now, our beliefs. Oh, good. As long as you can read it. The important thing is the information, right? Thank you, dear. Appreciate that. So our beliefs are the scaffolding on which we live our life. Think of your paradigm, right? The life paradigm. So this scaffolding is the foundation for the flow of awareness or attention. Because our awareness or attention only flows in the direction that we think is interesting, that we think is meaningful, that we think will bring us more happiness or more knowledge or more friends or more success or more fullness or whatever. So the belief is behind the flow of attention. All right, so that's the second point here, is attention. So belief controls attention. Belief tells attention basically where to go. Wherever attention goes, perception follows. So, and I was thinking about this and thinking that attention's kind of like a subtle form of perception. You know, when we think of perception, we think of the senses of perception. And so we could say, well, attention's just a subtler form of awareness, basically. And also in this model, I kind of like to think about the attention and the perception and also the next step, experience, as in their essential forms: pure attention, pure perception, pure amness or existence, right? So we have a kind of a subtle, the belief is gross, right? The belief is on the material level, and yet it influences the subtle level. It's very interesting. In our work in Vedic science, we've learned that the subtle comes first and it influences the gross, right? The delicate, more abstract, unmanifest layers of consciousness are the foundation upon which the manifest comes forth. But the reality, as long as we're humans and we're in our human bodies, is that there's actually a flow that goes both ways. And you'll see as we're going along here that the flow goes both ways even within these circles. And that flow that goes both ways is literally the manifestation of the divine. Because what does divine being do? It starts completely enmeshed in its own nature and folding only into its own self, only with its own resources. It creates the whole manifest field of creation, and then it reflects upon that manifest field of creation, and the reflection causes the source of creation to experience its own nature more completely. So it's a loop that goes back and forth, if that makes sense. Okay. So that gives rise to experience. So what happens is the belief sets up a condition or a boundary in which pure awareness, pure perception, pure existence, or pure amness, pure being resides within the constraints of that belief. This is how we experience it as humans. This is how we experience it. Okay. Experience, pure perception is just the innocent awareness of what's going on. But when we get to experience, then we start coming up into impression. And that's where that more purer form of just receiving reality, just receiving what we experience, starts to stick. So we put impression. Impression is next. And when it sticks, then we have something. We have something we can hold on to. And I'm putting analysis and synthesis together in one, because with analysis and synthesis, we have an inner and outer loop. But the impression, once an impression is held in the system, we can start to look at it, break it down into its constituent parts, which is analysis, and then take those constituent parts and integrate them back into the wholeness of ourself, which is synthesis. And that process of breaking the impression or experience into its parts and then reconstructing it as self, as a newer, bigger, more profound value of self, is the foundation for the upgrade in beliefs. So what we're really looking here is, what is the mechanic by which we upgrade our own belief system? Okay, so this is a circle. And to me, it makes sense. I don't know, but anyway, so we've got this, got this relationship we've analyzed. Now we've analyzed and we've broken down what are the constituent parts of the belief cycle. Now the next point is, when we apply energy healing to that, oh, I could write energy healing in the middle, but I'm not going to take my time. You get the idea, is then that creates a kind of a synthesis in this circle, which allows us to evolve our own ability to reconstruct our belief system in ever increasing alignment with cosmic evolution, with divine intention, with divine form even. Thank you for bearing with me through that whole thing. That was a bit of a go. So what I'm doing now is, now that we've laid out this cycle, I'm just asking being. I'm just going back to the first pure awareness, pure attention, pure perception, just diving back into that side of the circle and letting being be the guide and the director of how this cycle of evolution of belief can be supported to be as robust and powerful and efficient and stable and progressive and evolutionary as possible. Right. I'm getting that I have to tell you one more thing about this. The reason I'm drawing a line here is that these three parts of the process are very much just consciousness. They're just in the field of consciousness, area of what is attention attending to? Well, ultimately it's divine attention, divinity attending to itself, right? What is perception perceiving? It's perceiving the process by which divine attention attends to itself. And what's being experienced is being becoming, divinity in its essential state. So all three of these forms are giving us a very kind of broad-based, they're the expansive. We could say that's the, maybe I should have drawn the circle in like a different pattern, but this is where expansion takes place. Expansion is taking place through this whole half of the picture. In this side of the picture, contraction is taking place. So this side has an energy signature to it. It has its own unique characteristics, personality, has its own unique aspects. And when I look at that side, the contracting side of that diagram, and I look at the energy signature that's there, because the other side, the energy signature of the other side, the pure attention, pure perception, pure amness, is just quality less. It's quality less. But the other side, impression, analysis and synthesis, and belief, has a very distinct quality. It has a very distinct quality. So download for everyone the exact precise details of the distinct quality of that side of the loop. Is very useful to understand it both intellectually, but also from the level of finest feeling. Because whenever we're doing energy healing, right, we go down to that area of finest feeling. Well, what we find here is that in this more manifest side of the loop, this finest feeling expression of belief exists at the causal level of the body. Everybody remembers the diagram from material body all the way down to pure being, right? So causal level is the finest level of feeling, the deepest level, deepest manifest level. At that level, the belief cycle, the paradigm wheel, I call it the paradigm wheel, has a very distinct form. It has a form made of just consciousness, but it's very concise. It's concise. This is the first spot where we're doing a deep healing, energy healing, to integrate divinity. Divinity starts here integrating into the paradigm wheel and into the manifest side of that belief system, the belief process. And I'm just watching it happen as it's happening. I, as you know, do my best to answer, to speak it. There's not a lot of feelings like, you know, the last time when we were doing the thing for the parasympathetic nervous system, there's all this love and stuff. It's not like that at all with this side of the belief system. What seems to be happening is we've got the fine structure, which is at the causal level. So it's like a resonation or a sort of flow of the causal body. And it's folding into its own nature, because that is the nature, that's how beliefs are formed, right? It's consciousness folding in on its own nature. This whole diagram is that. And what I'm experiencing is an integration. Oh, nice. An integration of the quality-less, unbounded, infinite ocean of being with the aspect of the belief system which resides at the causal level. It's a very, very fine level. So it's like a very delicate movement, extremely delicate. But what's happening is it's like a kind of infusion. It's an infusion of infinity into this impression, analysis, synthesis, and belief levels of the system. I'm just watching. It's as if this part of the system is settling down deeply, and these qualities, impression, analysis, synthesis, and belief, are becoming clearer. They're becoming as if transparent. The energy signature that was defining this side of the cycle is becoming less defined. It doesn't mean that the ability to work with beliefs or the value of your belief system is becoming less defined. It doesn't mean that. It means that it's opening up to infinite possibilities. An important point about this side of the cycle is that the belief that directs attention in the first place is not the only limiting factor, right? We've talked about the fact, for example, that the senses of perception are limited in their range. As human beings, we only think one thought at a time. There are all kinds of limitations, actually, that we deal with as humans, and yet somehow we manage to, forge ahead. So the range or array of limiting features, boundaries, or limitations, these limitations are not being lost or eliminated, but they are becoming infused with the quality of infinite silence and infinite wholeness. It's opening up. It just looks like a flower opening up. This one I just took yesterday, took that picture. Still, that one's still blooming in my garden right now. It's like that, just the freshness, that flower just opening up. I'm offering that opening up of the experience to the silence of being, back to being. We're just offering it back to source. Now I'm noticing that the integrative energies that are moving through the denser part of the paradigm wheel are starting to move in waves. So it'll be like a layer, it's starting to build up in layers. So the integration is building up in layers across this denser side of the belief system cycle. It appears that superfluous information and energy is being released. There seems to be a system for determining what is not necessary. It's like cutting away the dead wood. That's what feels like is happening right now, cutting away the dead wood. Anything that's not necessary. And I'm still seeing just a little bit of an energy signature between the analysis and synthesis and the belief, but it's just very, very clear. But between the impression and the analysis and synthesis, it's very clear. It's very clear. When the impression does not stick, this is the definition of freedom from stress. For months before we had this webinar, before I came across all this information about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, I was thinking, how do we use energy healing to best eliminate stress? How do we use energy healing? Because stress is like, it's the bottom line, right? Stress is the bottom line. And stress, we know, as defined through the teachings of Maharishi, through Vedic science, is anything that leaves an impression on the nervous system. So that means even positive experiences can leave an impression, but anything that leaves an impression, that it creates some density in the nervous system, is considered stress. Now we come back to the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, dipping awareness into the field of being with the intention to cleanse the parasympathetic nervous system in such a way that no impressions are left in that part of the being, that the parasympathetic nervous system can function completely stress-free. Because that's the foundation for all the other healings, right? So we want that part at least needs to work. So I'm looking out into the field of everybody and how everybody's nervous system is doing and what's required. And some people are needing a kind of a nourishment. So for a lot of us, first of all, a quality of light medicine is being produced by our bodies at that causal level. which supports the parasympathetic nervous system turning back on its own nature to heal itself. Yes. Okay, so that's good, guys. That's good. Oh, so the parasympathetic nervous system can do this. It can do this. So this is step one. Parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for healing, folds back on its own nature and heals itself. And it's reflecting back to the exercise that we did earlier. And it's very interesting that that flow of love and nourishment, reverence that comes from the heart area is an integral part of the ability of the parasympathetic nervous system to heal itself. It's nature. See how beautiful we are? Like the nature of our beings and our bodies is just to be so sweet, to be so lovely, to be so precious, so adorable. I guess it's no surprise. Now, one of the things, it's no surprise, and I don't know about you guys, but as soon as that cycle starts happening in this physiology, bliss starts to flow again. And what's happening is the bliss is then reflecting back to source of creation. Because anytime we pass all the good back to, yes?
Is putting your attention on the breathing some, because you do that and everything settles.
Oh yeah, that is a really great question. So the question is, does putting attention on the breathing also help activate the parasympathetic nervous system? And the answer is yes, it does. And there are whole meditations that are built around just focusing on breath, for example. So yeah, absolutely, it does. And yet, the other part of that story, the question is really significant because the question is an illustration of the point that we have reached in this healing process, which is where we now have this ability to turn our attention around and activate the parasympathetic nervous system and activate these incredible waves of sweetness and bliss and comfort and joy and healing in the body. And then the next step is to reflect that back to universal or cosmic self, to being, to source. And that's what the breath does, right? The breath is, for those who've read the blog, I have a blog about the respiratory system, and that's the point, that's the whole point of the blog, is that our respiratory systems are a Reader's Digest version of the way in which wholeness of creation collapses to a point and then collapses back to wholeness again. It goes back, and because all the air is owned by no one, it's universally owned, is owned by the creation created the air. We bring it, it's all big. It's like the whole universal self and the soul of all. I think the Vedas call the air the soul of all. And we bring it in, and then we make it our individual self, and then we blow it back out, and it goes back to wholeness again. Endlessly, the whole lifetime. Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, absolutely. He's asking if we can put a link to that page on the knowledge base, and it's my pleasure to do that. I'm saving the questions for the end, but thank you guys for sending in some questions. I really appreciate it. All right. So now we know that we have this mechanism whereby we can self-activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and we don't need to necessarily have somebody outside to validate that, because our own heart becomes the validation. Very powerful, very beautiful. Let's go back. I'm going back to my notes here. Right. So when a person has spontaneous remission from a horrible disease that even the medical doctors cannot cure, what exactly happens there? Like, okay, so they believe that they are going to get better, and they've got a support system that's standing behind them going, yay, you're going to get better. We believe it too, and we really believe it, and we love you. And she said that the part of we love you is like super important for that. She said, if the caregiver does not genuinely love the person that they're taking care of, it doesn't work. Isn't that interesting? There has to be a level of compassion there, that the person really feels truly loved. They feel true compassion from the person who's taking care of them. It's very interesting. So, all right, so you've got that. Parasympathetic nervous system kicks into gear, and then the body starts to heal. The laws of nature that are responsible for turning fourth stage cancer around, for healing somebody who is about to die of sclerosis of the liver or anything else, whatever else ails them, a heart attack, whatever. Those laws of nature are in what we would call the department of the divine. They're at that level of self, which we would think of as big self, eternal self, cosmic self. So we have access to eternal self through our own physiologies. And I mean, obviously, every system of the body reflects the nature of divine self in some way or another, as per the example of the respiratory system. However, that divine self has to come through the filter of everything that we are as an individual. So for that reason, many different systems of understanding kind of divide up the idea of God as personal and impersonal. Even Christian religion divides to kind of a personal and impersonal God. We call Purusha and Purushottama in Vedic science. And the thing is that the personal God, and I use the word God presence to describe that presence of God in us as us, that personal God cannot do any more than we allow it. So based on our beliefs, for example, if we don't believe we're going to get better, even though God could make us better, right? God has the ability to make you better. If you don't believe that you're going to get better, God has to just kind of sit back and go, okay, you're in charge. That personal God, who is the connection to the universal level. And so my friend who I worked with quite closely for years when I was first getting started with energy healing used to say, God only knows what you know. God only knows what we know. And what he meant by that wasn't just that only God knows what we know. It was that God only knows what we know. If we only know this much of the picture, then that's how much God can function. That's the range within us that God can function. So what we're doing in this healing session tonight is we're expanding that range. We need to expand that range from the inside out in order to create and accommodate the infinite, unbounded potential of the divine to move through us, to work through us, and to promote and support our highest health and success and well-being and all that is good that can reflect back to the divine level of creation in a genuine and authentic reflection of wholeness, as a genuine and authentic reflection of wholeness. Okay. So a few questions have come in, and I want to be responsible for answering the people. And of course, as you all know, we're going to do this again tomorrow morning. So everybody's invited. All of you who are on the subscription program, you're all invited. Everybody's invited to come back and join me again tomorrow morning. And we'll take this on to its next level, because there, even as per my notes here, there are areas we have not yet covered tonight fully, but maybe we shall cover them in the questions. Well, one of the questions is that the picture was sent to me, but yeah, I'm not going to open my email while I'm doing this, so we'll have to do it later, maybe for tomorrow. So here's a question about belief. She's saying she may be missing some information about belief, where it comes from. What if belief is based on incorrect assumption Will the steps of the circle be able to rectify this and adjust the belief to one based on a correct assumption? I would say, thank you. That's a beautiful question. I'm so grateful and so right in line with today's session. My understanding, my belief is that this process of expansion and alignment of belief with the absolute truth of the total field of creation, of totality, absolute alignment with totality is a process. So there will always be new areas, as long as we're humans, because this is what humans, this again is a belief, but this is my belief I've been offering to you for months and years, is that one of the purposes of humanity is to be an instrument for the expansion of consciousness in creation, because God is already fully expanded. There's nowhere else for God to expand. Oh, except that God made humans, and humans have nervous systems that, where we experience life in a sequential unfoldment, and we therefore experience new things, and we learn stuff, and we grow, and we have this experience of expansion, and thereby the divine also has its cake and can eat it too. It can be everything and is everything and knows everything and is everywhere, and at the same time, through us, through the vehicle of humanity, it expands. Consciousness expands, awareness expands, knowledge expands, experience expands, everything expands. So because we are that which holds stable, you could say, the ever-changing or ever-expanding nature of creation through our consciousness, not to mention aspects of our life, all the way out to the physical material aspects. Because of that, this paradigm wheel rolls. It rolls. It moves. It keeps going through layers and layers and layers of expansion. So to answer your question, each time being or awareness rolls through this loop of the belief cycle or the paradigm wheel, it creates a new, better alignment of the belief system, closer alignment to the whole totality, the essential truth of the whole creation. And there's bliss in that. When the old assumption washes off and the new, it's like, that's what happened when I watched that Dr. Rankin video. I was like, oh, she's validating me. She's validating me. And then I was like, oh, the parasympathetic nervous system. Oh, whoa, my awareness expanded. It went into a new area I hadn't thought about. All of a sudden I'm thinking about it. I'm experimenting with it, right? So it was a new piece of information. And I'd always known that the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems were there, but she discovered that when we're healing, we're in parasympathetic mode. That was brilliant. That was brilliant stuff. Love that. Okay, so new information comes in, and then it gets added in, right, to the paradigm already existing. And I wouldn't say that the paradigm as it exists currently it's not all bad. I mean, it's definitely functional. But the healing that we did earlier infuses every step of that cycle. All those 6 steps, it infuses all of them with infinity, with eternity, with the actual pure essence of divine source. So that at every step, as that wheel rolls or unfurls, you could say, every step is moving at maximum capacity towards its fullest potential or its highest potential. Therefore, for example, just one example, the process of perception becomes a process whereby perception self-refines and expands, strengthens. Just as one example. There are all 6 of those steps. They become their own self-referral loops, which, They become their own self-referral loops, which have their own progressive, from within their own nature, effect on themselves. Can you speak again about the divine folding? Oh, the next question. I was just speaking about that. I love that. I love you. We're so connected. Can you speak again about the divine folding in on itself and how this is related to what you are sharing now? Oh, I love that your question is the very question that I just answered. Okay. I'm just seeing if there are any other bits and pieces. Okay, so awareness, being, divine being, folding in on its own nature. Every act of focusing attention intelligently in energy healing is, we think of attention as pure being, pure source material that we have the ability to direct. So when we, for instance, put our attention into our the parasympathetic nervous system, then that is divine being folding in on its own expression, which is the physical body. Think about how wonderful that was when our parasympathetic nervous systems got that boost of attention from us. It felt so good. It felt so good to the body. It felt so good to the parasympathetic nervous system. The question is, what other areas of ourself have we neglected? What other area of the physiology has just been plugging away, doing the best it can, and we've been kind of ignoring it, or just maybe even being a little exploitative with it, like, oh, you know, I just, like, sometimes I think about my right hand because I'm right-handed, right? And I really make my right hand do a lot of stuff. That right hand, it has to work a lot for me. So sometimes I use my left hand and rub oil into it, you know, to give it some loving attention. But, you know, we run our bodies like vehicles a lot of times, where we're just running them basically. And one of the principles of energy healing is to get a little bit into the more parasympathetic mode, where we're not just running, right? Not fight or flight, but in the more rest and digest mode. And just gently let the attention flow to different areas of the body that require it. Because attention flows there, it heals. And that is the self-referral loop of consciousness. That's divinity folding in on itself. All right. Let's see, we have another question. Here's a question. It says, could you talk about being able to maintain a state of not being gripped by a situation, or emotional, physical, or otherwise, versus becoming too detached so as to not deal with it? I feel like I have trouble going back and forth between these two polar extremes. Either I'm being gripped and overwhelmed by a situation, in other words, or she's like, just doesn't want to have anything to do with them at all. Okay. As she gets closer to the seed of an issue, and the pain sometimes becomes more intense, she finds herself kind of oscillating between these two energies, both with physical and emotional discomfort. And then there's a couple more questions here, so I think we'll just take one at a time. So, the detached is a sympathetic nervous system function, because sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight, but it's also like numbness. It's like shutting down, and I'm, you know, either I'm going to fight, or I'm going to run, or I'm just going to like completely shut down. So the detached is still a kind of a sympathetic nervous system effect. So if you're experiencing kind of oscillating back and forth between being gripped by, and again, the gripped by a situation is that response, it's like the sympathetic, it's also a sympathetic nervous system response, right? Like, oh, it's a terrible situation. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? So this happens as she gets closer to the seed of the problem or imbalance. So she's taking her awareness and she's diving down into the heart of the imbalance. And as she gets closer, it gets scarier. And what's happening is her system is oscillating back and forth by two different effects, both produced by the sympathetic nervous system. My experience is that the seed has a shell, and the shell is often colored by that which we fear the most. It's often colored by discordant feelings. The shell is there as long as the being isn't sufficiently powerful enough to get in and address that seed. So the shell protects the seed, but we, of course, don't want to take on something that's really massive if we aren't equipped. Now, that actually ties into her next question, which is, can you talk more about the relationship of these concepts, regaining or maintaining personal power? So setting and maintaining healthy boundaries, and accepting that some karma would come your way no matter what. Oh, and I love the way she framed this question. So in other words, maybe even if the person who delivered the karma, you know, who's like being disrespectful of your boundaries, wasn't in your life, the karma would have been delivered by another person. And that's just so true, isn't it? Yeah, see, we have a lot of raised hands on all these points from your question, darling, because lots of people are having similar experiences. So it's true that the karma is your karma regardless of who the postman is. So I think this next part of the question also elaborates. This is kind of where that question comes from. When you have something that seems negative to you, it comes into your life and to you, and you think, oh, maybe this is some karma. So I'm not going to blame the person who's bringing the karma to me, because it would have come to me whether that person was here or not. But in terms of setting healthy boundaries, if this person is repeatedly bringing negative outcomes into your life, is it best to try to remove that person, or, you know, are they a blessing in disguise of sorts? Yes, they're always a blessing in disguise. They were the person that you loved and trusted so much that they came to deliver the karma, so God bless them. And with regards to personal power, do you tell the person how their actions are negatively affecting you? Or is it part of your karma to evolve and be able to handle it on your own? Here's the thing, we're all dealing with karma all the time. As long as the karma is serving the evolutionary purpose. And that means sometimes having to be austere. For example, one of your friends raised a hand over here, and she was like, yes, she has having the same experience as you are. This friend has to be very austere. It's the nature of her reality to just not have a permanent home and not have a lot of belongings. And whenever she gets some kind of little nice something or another, it gets stolen or something happens to it. And it's just the karma. She's just letting go of stuff all the time, letting go. She has to let go of everything, let go of attachments, let go all the time. So as long as that karma is serving evolution, you will be able to bend with it. You'll say, you know, I can do this. I can let go. I've learned, I've trained myself to be easy with this situation. Oh, stuff walks away all the time, no problem. I'm there with it. I just keep moving on. I keep going for the highest. It keeps me going for the highest. As long as it's being useful that way, there's no need to do anything much about the karma. However, at some point, it becomes uncomfortable. And I know I've gone through this myself with people where I'd have a relationship with somebody that was difficult and challenging, but making me grow. And then there comes a point where I realize it's so painful and so uncomfortable. It's kind of not worth it anymore. And that is the time. Oh, raised hands. That is the time to take an action step. And at that point, when it becomes so uncomfortable, more people raising hands. when it becomes so uncomfortable that it's no longer, feels like there's the benefits no longer outweigh the discomfort, that's the sign from yourself that you are ready to move. And often it is accompanied by anger. It's really common that it's accompanied by anger or fear or some discordant feeling. And the discordant feeling arises as a source of energy and power to support your ability to make the necessary move to eliminate that situation from your life. Most situations in life, the tendency is just to let them go and keep going and keep doing, oh, and you keep adapting and adjusting and bending. But when it comes to the point that you're like, no, this is really awful, then we use the no, this is really awful energy as a tool to help find a creative solution, a win-win solution, because if it's time for the karma to move, it will be evolutionary for you and it will be evolutionary for the postman. Postmen don't like to deliver bad messages anyway. They would rather be in a different situation where they can deliver happy messages, packages, or Christmas presents or whatever. So a replacement for whatever walked away last week. That's what the postman wants to do. So rearranging the situation is often and usually sufficient, but it requires a certain amount of energy to kind of dig oneself out of the old situation and to get into the new. And that's why the discordant feelings crop up right there. It's like I was working for someone one time and I was very happy working for them, and it was freakishly hard work, and they kept saying they were going to pay me. And then, and after about a year and a half, whenever they were going to pay me, there always something. The lady would always say, oh, I had a car repair, I can't pay you this time. And the next time something else would come up, and oh, she couldn't pay me that time either. And after about a year and a half, I'm like, I didn't get paid once. And that's when I realized I am working so hard. This isn't, at some point, something flipped in me. And even though I loved the work and I loved the whole setup of what I was doing, all of a sudden there was a little part of me that felt a little resentful that I wasn't getting paid for a year and a half. And so then I was like, maybe I better do something about that. So I quit. And there was no loss because I wasn't getting paid anyway. So you get the picture. But on a deeper level of this question, we're getting close to the end, and there's still yet another question, which I will have to wait. Oh, bless your heart. I'll wait for tomorrow on that one. And it looks like there's another question coming in here as well. No more questions there. Okay, good. How does we want to put these two together though, that when we're going in towards the seed of an illness, right, we're determined, like, I'm suffering on the surface, I don't want to suffer anymore, I want to get into that seed. And how do I manage to stabilize awareness in such a way that as I get to that seed, I don't automatically flip into a parasympathetic fight or flight response? How do I do that? Number one, set up your sacred healing space by doing the exercise that we did at the beginning of this session. That will get the whole parasympathetic nervous system activated and online. And I'm telling you guys, one of the big things that happened to me as I was preparing for this this lecture or this webinar was I kept getting information coming from various places that was exciting and interesting, but it was kind of activating my sympathetic nervous system. So I had to exercise, I had to practice with it to see, well, if I'm in fight or flight response, how do I actually get myself out of fight or flight response and back into that lovely, luscious healing mode space, which is so wonderful. And what I found was that this was a really fast way to do it. I mean, of course, infinite gratitude, never ending, accelerating at an increasing speed, moment by moment, to the eternal tradition of masters who have given this world transcending meditations, because that's also a fast way. But the thing is, usually when a person's meditating, they set conditions, right? They unplug the phone, they find a quiet time when they don't have other appointments, they say to their friends and family, oh, I'm going to go meditate, please do not interrupt me, that kind of thing. But usually when we're in a fight or flight situation, like getting in a car accident, or no, I didn't do that, thank you. May none of us ever do that. But you know what I'm saying, like somebody just contacted me today and said, oh, on top of my already busy schedule, he needs me to film 3 hours worth of material. And I'm like, okay, I don't know when that's going to happen. So before I leave for California, which is in less than a week. So yeah, so time constraint, when we're trying to do intense activity in a time constrained situation, that really kicks off the fight or flight response. So I got to look at that up close and personal. And what I found was that this exercise worked really, really well. So if the body is wired to start to flip out when you try to heal yourself, then set up the exercise first and get everything calmed down and then go into it. The other thing is, once you've gotten used to activating the parasympathetic nervous system, what you'll find is that it starts to happen more efficiently and quickly. And when you notice any little tiny little thing starting to activate that fight or flight response, you'll start to notice. You'll start now, because we've put it out here now. Now it was new on my radar. Now it's new on your radar too. So now we'll start to see, oh, this thing is it's just starting to kick up my fight or flight response. Okay, before the fight or flight response becomes too intense, I counteract, I counterbalance with the parasympathetic, right? And you'll be able to do that, and it becomes like more of a fine tuning or a dance between these two aspects of the system. And then when that happens, it's like a massage. It's like a very, very subtle, using consciousness. It's like a very beautiful, subtle massaging back and forth within the entire spinal column. And that is so healing. It's so profound, because the fight or flight says, oh, there's a stress. And the parasympathetic says, oh, well, I can help you take care of that. And so watch as you're going along. This is what we've done today, is we've sown the seeds of a very long-term, powerful relationship within ourselves with our own healing response. So yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, right. A divine. Oh, yeah. One lady's saying it's a divine dialogue. Yes, it is. It's a divine dialogue. Well put. So exactly. So that integrates divinity so fast. And it's such a fine movement. When your spine talks to itself, the two ends are talking to the middle, or talking back and forth like that. It's such a delicate movement. When I move my hand, that's a big movement. But when my spine talks to itself, that's such a fine, fine movement. So what it means is a divine dialogue going on at a very, very physically tender, physically delicate level of the body. And that ties into our original healing at the beginning of this session. Yes, where we were doing the exercise for the parasympathetic nervous system, where it decided to turn around and heal itself. It's very delicate, but that's the level. I think there's a note somewhere too. That's yes. We'll go into that more tomorrow probably, but that's a very, very fine level. It's a reflection of activity taking place at a very fine level of consciousness as well. And I'll talk more about that tomorrow, and more about connection between universal being and individual and so forth. But our time is already up, and I've even kept you guys a little bit late. Out of respect, I will close tonight's meeting. But thank you all so much for being here. It's been a very powerful session. I can't wait to see what evolves out. I love you guys. I can't wait to see what evolves out tomorrow from this. Thank you. Any other questions, feel free to email them in. I love you too. I love you all so dearly, and I'm so grateful that we get to be together and we get to do this work. It's really quite amazing. All right. See you soon. Bye. Bye for now.